Welcome to NGV, your home of art. This is print screen. This is a live recording of a podcast all about publishing, distribution, and new forms of culture, kind of post-COVID as well. So we're here today. There are two panels today. This one on digital publishing and art criticism, and also one later on about dance and how bodies have migrated online post-COVID. So my name is Emile Zile. I'm an artist based in Melbourne. And I've been interviewing a broad range of artists and writers and researchers around these topics for this project commissioned by the NGV. So we're very esteemed to be sharing the stage with these three beautiful people today, talking about online criticism. And what does it mean to circulate criticism online? How do the realms of print and digital commingle? And also, what are the challenges around self-publishing and finding your audience? How do you assess value and impact, all these kind of things? So, brief introduction. Emilia is a Melbourne-based writer and curator. She's a PhD candidate in art history at the University of Melbourne. And she was previously sub-editor of Un magazine. Diego, artist and writer whose writing features in Art in Australia, Un Project, Runway Journal, Art Collector, Australian Book Review, and is the editor-at-large at Running Dog, a publishing platform based in Sydney. And Anador Walsh, who is the founding editor of Performance Review, a new website which is looking at performance specifically and online, well, not online, but dance more broadly. And she's written for the Saturday paper, and yeah, these are our guests, and shall we do a very underwhelming round of applause in this giant room to welcome them? No, yes. That was good. Thank you. The round of applause like yesterday was lost in this big hall, but that was beautiful. The chairs are closer. The energy is here. So, yeah, I think I'll hand over to our guests and maybe get them to talk a bit about their platforms and basically do a bit of an outline of how they engage with this online space and art criticism more generally. So, yeah. Amelia, would you like to
I'll begin.
commence? Thank you.
Thanks, Emile. So I am an editor and co-founder of Mimo Review, which our tagline is Melbourne's only weekly arts criticism. And we started in 2017 mainly because, as a group of art historians, group of friends who kind of felt like there was just no accessible arts criticism in Melbourne. The Age had recently, I think, cancelled Robert Nelson's weekly review, and so it was just basically trying to fill that gap, but also more broadly trying to fill a gap in Australian arts criticism, which is literally criticism, as opposed to criticism, which, critique that is pure description of art. So we started that in 2017 just to see how it would go, and we publish a long format review of a Victorian exhibition every Saturday, and it's always been free, and we do 48 reviews every week. And we also, at the end of every year, publish the reviews in book format. So yesterday we launched at CAP 2019 and 2020, just to kind of give and we'll talk about this later on, I think, the way that the book kind of adds a different dimension to an online platform and to kind of just give it a longer lifespan, I guess. I think that's it for now.
Yeah, good.
And over to you.
I'm Anador. I'm the founding editor of Performance Review, which I guess is best described as being a new platform that's purely digital, that looks at creatively and critically engaging with specifically performance practice. Performance, I guess, to our thinking, covers dance, live art more broadly. And I guess we differ from Mimo in the sense that I kind of rail against the academic, and I'm curious about having, I guess, a platform to talk about performance art in a way that's rather intuitive. So I'm thinking, writers who are not necessarily within the canon of arts writing. So you've got poets, people who are from a law background, anything and anyone can contribute, and it's more about intuitively engaging with performance. So we're going to be purely digital, and I think we'll touch on that more, I guess, later on. But so we're going to be purely digital, and it's going to be talking about performance in a way that's totally open and open to input from, I guess, any sector. Yeah.
Well, hello. I am here representing Running Dog, which is actually based in Sydney. So I am the editor at large there. And Running Dog was founded by the chief editor, Naomi Riddle, about 3 years ago. And it was similar to Mimo in the sense that it was like a weekly format, also seeking to provide more regular reviews. Since then, they have expanded into literature, digital poetry, and other kinds of writing formats. Last year, we worked on 3 special issues. And probably my favorite was a video game that was in one of them, the Automate Me issue, which was very like techno apocalypse kind of thing. And me as an editor at large, I can basically commission pieces, and I work with them to edit them. But I have a lot of creative freedom, so I commissioned 5 pieces that obliquely dealt with the idea of the plague, because we were in a plague, but not in a naff way. It was just kind of like in a very oblique. So one of the pieces, for example, was looking at Star Trek. One of the figures in Star Trek, and thinking about seroconversion in relation to that, but also how the art world works in a similar way by it's self-multiplying. So it was this really strange meditation on like culture and disease and science fiction. And all of it had this very like gothic aesthetic. And I created like a special website for it as well. That's more or less Run Dog.
Yeah. Your job.
Yeah.
I'm curious to ask you about the position of art criticism more broadly, locally. You mentioned that Robert Nelson's column was cancelled, and this kind of destabilization of print that's happened over the last few years with Real Time magazine, which is focused on performance and live art, more specifically dying away and turning into a blog format. So, I wonder, is that an influence to you? Do you look at the kind of the cost and death of print journalism, and does that propel you into the online world, or is it more of a deeply online sensibility that is more organic, I'd say?
I think print is always, I don't know about YouTube, but print is always kind of like the holy grail. You still, as much as people will say that print is dead and all that, there's something still very beautiful about a book or a magazine or a newspaper that online will never actually achieve. But having said that, these are the resources available to us. We're time poor, we're money poor, and it's actually quite easy to publish online and reach a really wide audience. So I think that for me personally, I still love print, but it's simply not, it's not sustainable as like the only model. And even now with newspapers, I know that I said that Robert Nelson's column had been cancelled, but in the meantime, The Age has launched kind of like a broader arts criticism platform with a number of young writers. I think Melbourne or Sydney as well.
What's that called?
Oh, I don't know. It's
Okay.
The Age, look it up. But, you can still access that online as well. So even a lot of print is pivoting to online. And I think just generally that just demonstrates how unsustainable print is in a digital age.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I guess I come at it from the perspective of my initial study was in journalism, and I didn't actually complete that degree because halfway through journalism, I started to realise that print was dying, and in that death, that level of, integrity, the integrity of writing and research was also dying. Everything was becoming highly sensationalised, and whilst I love the idea of being able to hold something tangible, the costs that are associated with that and the compromises that you sometimes have to make in order to do that. Think about magazines that have 40 pages of advertising in the front and back section in order to produce the content within the middle 60 pages. So I think having a space online that is independent is really amazing, and it's amazing to be able to just go, okay, this is kind of my MO, and I'm going to do this, and I can. Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, I just thought of something very quickly. Most of us, we produce reviews in real time, meaning that, for Mimo at least, our general rule is that the show that we review that week has to be still available for viewers to watch. Yeah. Therefore, if we were to wait, for print and that kind of cycle, it would never actually kind of come out in real time. And I know that there are a lot of other publications like Art Forum, and who else? A lot of publications like that which never actually publish the review when the exhibition is on. So that's another kind of benefit of it. I don't know, is Running Dog real time as well?
For the most part.
Yeah.
So very close to... I was thinking as well, I guess the benefit of printed media is that it can be collected by a library and just the future lifespan. But it should change with websites as well, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's interesting that traditionally these art criticism magazines would have a website as a kind of additional kind of extension of their main practice, which is the publishing, but then you have this example of Mimo and others where you're kind of building this bank of content and then printing compendiums of sorts, so kind of historically capturing all that energy from online and then putting it into print.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it, like it's historicising it. And like you're saying, Diego, then you can attach an ISB. So what we do is we do a year of reviews and then we quickly design a book and then print it, and there's an ISBN attached to it, and we can distribute it through libraries, and it kind of just allows... I don't know how online works so much, but I think that it's so in flux that there are always going to be changes made. So this is kind of setting something in stone as a historical record that I'm not sure online does.
So I'm thinking about typos. Like, do you have to do...
Oh my God.
Do you have to do a very intense edit before publishing the book?
But the thing about... I don't know about you, but I'm really lazy now when I write a review because I'm like... I'll publish it and then on a Saturday morning, people will just message me and they'll just be like, oh, there's a mistake in your review. And it's so easy to just go online and
to change it.
Fix it. So yes, but it is quite a process after that because we are also lazy now with online and copy editing.
Yeah, I think that issue of speed is very interesting in relationship to an internet platform, that you have this kind of immediate publishing happening quite directly, and I think that's just a kind of affordance of the internet, that you have this gigantic amount of speed attached to it. And I also wonder about these platforms. Maybe if you could talk a bit about how that sense of publishing reflects how that kind of speed of publishing affects the real world perception of those artworks. Like as you mentioned that Frieze and Artforum would have a 2 or 3 month delay where the work is already kind of out of the daily consciousness, that it's kind of already gone through some cultural gatekeeping moments of this is good art. And I wonder, I mean, yeah, for a local scene and a local community, how does that impact when you have direct kind of feedback, a kind of very direct feedback loop happening as the show's up?
Good question. I noticed the other day on like the performance review Instagram, you were kind of also simultaneously saying like, you know, I've reviewed Amrita's show and now it's going to be like closing soon. So there's also kind of like a sense of advocacy, I guess, going on.
Yeah, and I think that especially for us, I think I don't know, I don't think I articulated this very well, but I think part of the reason why I decided to start performance review was during COVID and specifically the lockdowns we had here, I noticed that institutions were kind of really capitalizing on, I guess, the more transmutable elements of performance. So the fact that it can be made for camera and then exhibited online, and then using that to continue to maintain relevance during a period where we couldn't be in a space like this and see art. And so I think part of the reason why I wanted to do performance review was to be able to say about performance, like, hey, it's still here, it's still happening, it's still being exhibited, and it's not going to go back into being this sort of like subsidiary, which it kind of can be at times, can be singularly presented as a public program. So it's like, yeah, I think that advocacy is really important, and why I guess I'm choosing to market it in that way. Yeah.
I guess with performance also, it's just so, I mean, you do performance art, and it's so time-based.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like, it's even more pressing than that it is recorded, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think it's important that it is recorded, and I think also that because you're effectively, in most cases, watching a person perform in front of you, I think it's really important to have a human engagement with that as well. Just the idea that, you know, I mean, personally, I find performance to be really effective in, I guess, like all ways, be it academic or emotional. So to be able to document that in a way that's not just simply temporal, like as in going like turning to a friend and saying, oh, I saw this and it made me think this, feel this, X, Y, Z. Being able to document that and keep it is important, yeah.
Did you feel like performance was lacking in the overall kind of art criticism space, that it needed that specific focus?
I mean, yeah, I think I did feel that way, and I think I felt it more in the sense of when you are a mid-career artist, you will, and especially if you work in performance, or you are a more senior artist, you will be written about. Or if your work is, I mean, a friend who's actually written for Running Dog called Eugene Yunam Chung always says that if a work is bad, it will not be written about because ignoring it is the best thing that you can say. And I sometimes think that unless you are making genuinely disconnected art, if you're a senior artist, you will be addressed. But I'm kind of interested in giving space to people who are younger and more emerging and working in these modes so that they can be talked about. Yeah.
I mean, that brings up, again, that interesting question about cultural gatekeeping and how do you assess value and impact. And if you're very hands-on editorially assessing impact, that's just your claim that you're making and you're pushing it out there. That's an interesting territory to work in, yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of criticism around art criticism being a form of gatekeeping as well. And it's a very, I don't know if you find this as well, but...
Yeah, well, there's kind of like a shadow to this as well, that when someone gets a good review, because there's like a tall poppy syndrome or whatever, people around them get very snarky towards the artist. Or
really?
I feel I feel like I've witnessed that a few times where like if someone gets good criticism, people around them, you know,
Get jealous,
yeah.
I mean, I actually think the same thing goes for writing. I mean, Emile, you touched on it before when you were talking about do people ever read reviews and does that then inform their opinion of work? I think some of the interesting things I've seen recently are people really taking on institutions, be it from a decolonial perspective or another perspective, and then getting backlash for having that perspective if it's lauded. So I've seen some things circulated, and then people have been like, yeah, like this is really amazing, this is a really strong critique. And then the flip side of that is that like the kind of like the older wave of people in the art world or generationally will kind of go, like, I don't really feel comfortable with that, and rail against that kind of. Yeah, so I think it works both ways.
Yeah, company excluded in this, in this building.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned COVID earlier, this nightmarish 2020 that we had. I mean, was that much of an impact for your writing practices, or are artists and writers inherently kind of living in solitude in a darkened room in Fitzroy? Like, did it affect you very much? How was the
artists live in Fitzroy?
They live in
Do
Fitzroy.
you live in Fitzroy?
They pushed out to Preston, Coburg, maybe. Yeah. Like, how did 2020 COVID affect the kind of self-publishing that you were doing?
I wasn't publishing.
I got very religious. Like, I read the Bible. Like,
From start to finish?
no, but I read like the New Testament, and I wrote like a bunch of pieces about it. I think it's directly related to. I think it was like a stress response to COVID. But in terms of like publishing, I felt like online criticism was actually very well suited for the times because it already had the infrastructure to create content, while museums and galleries had to desperately like figure out a way of spending their grant money, or they would lose it the next year, kind of thing. So I feel like we were in a very good place.
It was like, for Mimo, we just continued business as usual.
Yeah.
And, so many galleries pivoted so quickly to online that we were just able to follow suit. I mean, if anything, our rules kind of became a bit more relaxed. So, of course, we couldn't do real-time reviews. And it's funny, like looking at the 2020 book, it's a lot fatter than our other books, just because I think people are like just writing, like there's just a lot more, I don't know, they just had more time to write, I guess. But we still produced 48 reviews last year. We didn't miss a week at all. And yeah, like you're saying, like online is perfect for that. You just do it from the comfort of your own home.
Do you find the schedules difficult to follow, or was it?
Meaning, like...
So, like, working with deadlines, was that difficult, or...?
I mean, we always have difficulty working with deadlines.
Yeah.
We're a small team and we have a schedule every week, but there's always, someone who's forgotten it's their week to review, or, writers who, just send their reviews really late. I don't know. We make it work. A lot of Friday night post drinks uploading.
Yes.
But we're quite used to it now.
Yeah, I guess that's also a very practical question we can talk about too, about this organizational structure around, like, how do you deal with large editorial boards? How do you deal with kind of content that isn't coming in on time? I mean, are there any kind of points you could talk about in relationship to how you organize internally in a very practical way?
I mean, like I said, Mimo just started as like a little experiment and we didn't think we'd be going for this long, but in the 4 years that we've been going, we've had to kind of address a number of structural issues, such as, for instance, overwhelmingly, the core members are white, save me. And, at the beginning it was just like, that was just the way it is because art historians are white, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So now there's kind of like structural things that are coming into play so that we can kind of mitigate that. But also from a kind of really administrative perspective, we started getting funding from Creative Victoria in our second year onwards. It's never a given every year, but the first year we were auspiced by Monash University and it was a total nightmare. So in the third year, we incorporated. So now we have a board, committee members, and kind of like all these really formal roles, president, secretary, and all that. And it is a lot to juggle just to produce one review every week. But it's kind of something that over time inevitably happens. I mean, we were talking the other day about how, like, Anador is doing performance review all on her own. You are writer, commissioner, commissioning
Everything,
person,
all the things, yeah.
Yeah.
editor, and that like is also, I think, you're saying the challenges reveal themselves as they go along.
Yeah, in real time as well. Like, I think I'm really lucky in the sense that, you know, I think the art world, and I think especially here in Melbourne, is super, I guess, like willing to sit down and go through things with you. So, for example, I started performance review very much from like a place of passion and being quite gung ho and being like, you know, COVID allowed me to use my expendable income to start something new that I genuinely believe in. And so I think I kind of just went, you know what, I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to do it. And then problems present themselves. And I was actually really lucky to be able to call Amelia and go, hey, like these are the problems that have presented themselves, and talk to her and workshop some, I guess, strategies for how not to do that again next time. And I think that's something too. Like, I mean, I had considered an editorial board, and that's something that was always a long-term ideal for me. But like having a conversation with Amelia, and I think I had a conversation with like 4 or 5 other people, including a friend who I've mentioned before, who's called Eugene, and it just made that really apparent to me. And I think going into our second issue in April, I have a very different approach now, and we've gone out to people to actually ask, or I say we, I have gone out to people to construct it's like you use that as like sort of like a smokescreen, we. But I think I've now gone out to people to create an editorial board, and central to that for me is the idea that as a white person, I don't want to be siloedly making decisions. I want to be making that in conjunction with people of, I guess, like all backgrounds, and having perspectives that differ from my own. So that's kind of been the central pillar of my, hey, like, please, board on request kind of email system. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't imagine doing it alone. Yeah. I mean, what's the experience for like editor at large? Who are the core members?
So, because Running Dog began similar to you, right? It was Naomi's project. So Naomi is editor-in-chief, and she's the one who sets kind of like the vision of Running Dog. Then Hannah Jenkins is the assistant editor, and she handles mainly the poetry submissions. There's a poetry micro-residency. And then as editor-at-large, I kind of like... So I will speak, you know, for example, if I want to commission a piece, I will speak to Naomi, then she'll be like, oh yeah, that's fine, and I'll go for it, and then we will edit it together. And then the special issues, we also edit them all together. So Running Dog is actually changing the publishing format as of tomorrow, I think. So we're going to work with fewer writers, so I think it's just going to be one writer every few months, creating like a very large piece. And I'm mainly just going to be involved with one more piece at the end of the year, and then with the poetry submissions as well. So I help score those ones. But yeah, there's no board either. Yeah, it's like very grassroots.
Yeah. And you talked about funding from state government sources, OSCO. I'm also curious about the kind of trend of Patreon, of kind of finding your audience and asking them to pay directly for that content. Is that something you've thought about or considered in a very kind of American model of let's really approach our audience directly and get them to fund it? Or is that not as enticing, exciting as it seems?
Mimo does have Patreon. We've only just launched it because our funding is not guaranteed from year to year. And, you know, we have been able to pay our writers a good fee for the past 3 years, and we just need to have some kind of fallback. If this year we can't pay writers, it's, you know, why are you going to do it? Oh, well, you get used to the idea of being paid, and everyone deserves to be paid. So that's why we have it. It's tacky, or it's not ideal. But it's kind of the reality of how arts organisations are surviving. And also, we kind of, it's just kind of like we need to we've decided now that we want to keep going, and this is probably, you always have to have some kind of financial backing. It's super American, like you say. Like, I think you can only donate in American dollars as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, does Running Dog have
Yeah, it
Patreon?
has a Patreon. Yeah. So actually, the first 9 months of like my role was funded by the Patreon. Yeah. We also have OSCO and copyright agency. So I think the copyright not anymore. Sorry, I'm just yeah. Oh. just just get confused with the volume of the microphone. Anyway. Yes, I think the copyright agency funded the special issues.
Okay.
Yeah, and then OSCO is going to fund the projects moving forward. Yeah,
Well, I mean, I think
I should make a Patreon.
actually it's on my list of things to do. No, I think years ago when I was a lot younger, I had a publication that was in print that I ran, and a few years ago I did all of my tax returns for it with an accountant, and I said, I'm really worried about this project. I've never paid tax on it. What do I do? And he said, you've bled $13,000. Like, this is not a tax issue. This is a hobby that you've, yeah, it was completely written off. And I think when I did that, I was so convinced that doing like a Kickstarter would be this horrible, tacky thing where people would go, oh, like, she's relying on us to do this. And I think now, post of that, and in starting this project, like, yes, it's self-funded at the moment, but I would love to have a Patreon. I love it. Like, I think I always look at the transparency on Running Dogs, for example, and the fact that it tells you down the bottom how much money they make monthly on that. I think that's amazing. Like, to see, like, you can see where the money goes into the organisation and then goes out into the riders, and I think that's really important. So whilst it's kind of a weird thing to ask, I think at the same time it's such a, you can see the benefit in it. So yeah, I'm all for it. I think
And
it's
also,
great.
you're providing a free service. This is
Totally.
a thing, like,
Yeah.
none of these, websites, you don't have to pay to read them. You get full access, regardless of whether or not you want to give. It's just kind of like an option.
Yeah.
So I think at the end of the day, like, readers get a lot out of it. It's not, yeah.
I also think you get so much out of it, but you also get things that are just really crucial. Like, I mean, it's really funny to be on this panel, I think, because I love Running Dog and I absolutely love Mimo. And I think, I mean, one of my first art writing experiences was through Giles, who was one of my tutors at uni, and it was for the original Mass Mimo, and that was such an experience. But the thing and like, that was amazing. And so you get people kind of coming up and doing things. But I also think it's the things that get to be said on those platforms about things that, generally speaking, do not get challenged or critiqued. Like, I loved it when in Running Dog there was like a critique of the Archibald and of Ben Quilty. And like, both of those pieces, I was just like, yes, get it, like, do that. But like, I think without these platforms, there isn't that level of engagement sometimes. Sometimes we just go, yeah, okay, and accept something as it is without thinking deeper.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Maybe another quite practical question about integration with social media. I mean, yeah, what are your approaches? Like, is this a very direct relationship where you're kind of posting and kind of wanting to get that immediate kind of social media hit, or do you have larger kind of strategic visions for social media? Is not participating in social media also an action? It's a broad question. Please attack it how you would like.
You're like social media queen.
Yes, no, I mean...
I am.
I am, that's me. No, actually, I love it. Like, I'm all for it. I think you can do... I mean, I disagree with some of the things that play out on social media, just is like in broader terms, but I do think it has this capacity to really shine a light on things or platform things that can be really amazing and powerful. And I think part of the way that I worked with performance review is kind of just being like, hey, like, we're here, we're doing this. I keep saying we, but it's me, but like, you know what I mean? It will be a we soon. But yeah, I think it's a wonderful tool in allowing you to just actually do something and do something that you really believe in. And I think it allows you to communicate beyond yourself and your immediate networks. But yeah, I can understand why people don't want to be the loudest thing ever on social media. But
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think what my question was trying to mine was also how do you find new audiences?
Oh,
Because
okay.
there could be this idea that you're kind of circulating information to your own social group, and that could be a bit of a silo of,
But social media is kind of like that as well, isn't it?
yeah,
Like that's
exactly.
the silo.
Yeah, so how, I'm curious about strategies to find new audiences, or like are there ways apart from public settings to kind of spread the word? Like how do you get the word out there? Are there other approaches to publicity?
Well, I find with social media, and we forget this, but there are actually companies that profit from the content that we generate, and they encourage interactions that create them profit. So I find that, for example, like Twitter is like a fucking jungle. It's like,
Yeah.
people with machetes and shit. But that's because, that makes Twitter money, and we like totally
Yeah.
forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so weird that I'm about to quote Jay-Z, but Jay-Z was interviewed recently where he said that, like, he doesn't understand the concept of Black Twitter, for example, because in order to be advocating for yourself, you actually have to be advocating on a platform that's owned by some crusty white guy. Like, he actually was like, why are you giving them your intellectual property and allowing them to profit off of that? And he's correct. Like, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I think we're so engendered to communicate this way. Like sometimes, during this is the first time I've seen Amelia outside of social media in a long time. And this is the first time Diego and I have met in real life. And I think that, which is wild, really wild. But I think that it says something about the capacity, within our silo to connect. But I do think if you're asking the question about reaching new audiences, the thing about every single person who is networked through the algorithm is that I will not always know people. Then he cross-promoted that on his platform that then gets passed on to those people who might then disseminate it out to, and it's kind of a knock-on effect. And whilst you can totally put money behind it and pay to target people who have similar interests, which I don't think I am interested in doing, but whilst you can do that, there's also a natural way of that happening. And I think that is how it happens. It's sort of like a knock-on effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Regramming.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Power of the
just reminded of Thomas Jeppe's publishing projects. Like, I don't remember what it's called, but it's like this A4 sheet of paper, which is kind of like a newsletter stapled, and he was handing it out in a kind of very counter social media way. What was it called again? Can't remember. No.
That's
But
how
yeah.
the French Revolution operated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like this very self-conscious avoidance of digital and almost this very kind of very hokey, dusty, literally pamphleteering as another option.
I think we're all very pro social media though.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
definitely pro social media.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if it's time to open it up to the audience. If there are any questions people would like to shoot at our panel, Emilia and Anador and Diego, you are welcome to ask a question, and I'll keep talking until there is a question. And a hand is up. Thank you.
Hi. Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for the panel. It's been really insightful and great to hear from everybody. I wanted to ask specifically about Aboriginal criticism and sort of embracing Aboriginal artists and their work, Aboriginal writers as well too, and how you sort of navigate that. For instance, white writers writing about Aboriginal work and stuff like that. I remember the artist Vernon Arkey doing this great kind of piece, I think, with Daniel Browning, where he's like, I'm at the point where I don't care if people say bad things about me. I just want someone to say something about me. I just wanted to get the panel's thoughts.
It's a really good question because on the one hand you do, overwhelmingly I would say that there are not enough Indigenous writers are commissioned to write about First Nations artists. But on the other hand, there is probably also a real fear on the part of white writers to write on First Nations artists because they're afraid of saying something wrong. I think that for me personally, as a non-First Nations person, I would like to have more Indigenous writers writing for Mimo. But like I was saying, because it's structurally quite white to begin with, it's hard not to be tokenistic. So we're actually developing at the moment a First Nations editorship, which would be kind of like a satellite of Mimo, but there's kind of like full control on the part of the editor. But I mean, it's quite, I think what you're also suggesting is that it's any criticism or any exposure for a First Nations artist is better than this kind of ignoring the art. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
We're certainly not going to say anything negative, but maybe let's not say anything in case we say the wrong thing.
Yeah, and I mean, you probably see this as well, that a lot of white writers are very, very cautious about writing about artists of colour for that reason. I don't know, I find that it's so important then to have dialogues with artists and with people of colour and to actually see what they want. It's also quite case by case rather than this kind of systematic thing. But yeah, it's complicated, it's sticky.
It is, and I think it's also very much approach-driven, in my opinion. Like, I mean, for the launch of Performance Review, I wrote about Amrita Hepi's Monumental, and I wrote about that in a way that I thought was... I mean, my approach to writing that piece was Amrita's work is about Indigenous ways of knowing, being and doing, and imagining a future that is First Nations-led. And I think the thing that hit me the most when Amrita was talking to me about the work and when I was experiencing the work was in the town that I grew up in. There's a statue of Edmund Barton that sits on the side of an Indigenous Buripai burial ground. And during 2020, there was this fight to remove the statue, and it was really stalled, and I could see these simultaneous tensions. So I consulted with community in Port Macquarie, or Guruk is the Indigenous name for Port Macquarie. I consulted with community, and then I wrote about Amrita's work through the prism of that. And whilst, no, I don't think the piece that I wrote is like overly critical in terms of like that framework. It's a responsive piece, and I think that was, for me, an important approach to take to that work. But I also think, in answering to what you were saying about having a specifically First Nations curator, editor, I think, for me, part of doing this project and having started it alone and being a white woman is that I really want to create space for those voices. So I have two slots within our, I guess, like writing plan for the year that are specifically First Nations. So there's one that's been given already to Jazz Money, and there's another that I'm in conversation with at the moment, because I think just creating like those actual spots is really important as well, but then having an approach that's really dialogue-based as well, where you allow people to come back at you and say, that's not the right approach, this would be my suggestion. I think having an open-ended and discursive approach to how you do things in that respect is really crucial as well. Yeah. What about you? How do you...
Well, we're very lucky to have First Nations writers' approaches, for example, with every special issue. Yeah, we're lucky because we don't have a First Nations editorial. But basically, we emphasize more giving voice rather than... Yeah, because, the thing is, there's... you have white writers or whatever wanting to write about something, but then there's this other writer who's writing about the same thing that actually has that cultural heritage. So yeah, why would you give the platform to the person who is like an outsider to it when you have someone that has lived experience? And yeah, there's like a large, there's a lot of writers to actually choose from. And I also find that writers of color find it, because the communities overlap more, they feel more comfortable writing reviews about First Nations artists.
Yeah.
I think, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess in regards to social media and art, I can't help but think of the recent controversies in Tasmania and the kind of Mona outcry last week as a kind of, as it's glaring me in the face that...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate you, Santiago. I hate you.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what's interesting about that debacle is, I think the thing that, you can, I think we've entered a stage where it's no longer okay to say that we didn't know better. Like, I think approach is everything, and if you don't have the ability to look outside of yourself and have people in the room that actually are able to say, like, as a First Nations person, this is horrendous. I don't understand why you're even bothering entering the conversation at all. Like, that for me is just like, it's inexcusable. Like, and I would say that till the cows come home. Like, it was just mind-blowing to me that somebody would not have anyone else in the room to give them insight into how wrong that was.
But I think they did. They do
They
have.
did?
I think there was like internal backlash, because it was a lead up of like years. Like,
But how did it get through like, for me, it's like, how does it get through that process of years?
mysteries. Mysteries of the art world.
Do we have another question for our panel? Yes.
I hate talking through these things, but I want to ask you about the idea of the critic kind of being this like external independent voice, but yet Amelia and Anador, you both curate, and Diego has an art practice. So is there a level of insider trading going on?
Yeah, always.
Absolutely.
But like, how are you ever going? I mean, who was that Australian John Hughes? No,
John Hughes?
no,
Who? Robert Hughes?
Robert Hughes. Yeah, and his approach to arts criticism was: don't collect art, don't be friends with artists, don't have relationships with anybody in the art world. But how is that? I mean, I just don't see how that is possible. It's just really important to exercise a level of, I guess, awareness that there is kind of incidental, I guess, conflict of interest, and then there's like overt conflict of interest. There is never going to be a complete lack of conflict of interest, don't you think?
No.
Well, no one writes about me. Such a bad deal, because I spent all this time writing about other people.
No, but I think you go through more the oral history kind of Ben. I was at a dinner party recently where somebody said to me they really loved this work of Diego's and they use it as like a rule of thumb in the art world.
Thank you.
But he made this work where he said it talks about like the opening as being like an art exhibition opening as being like this like social minefield, and there's this line in it: never trust an arts administrator who also doesn't have a practice. And I think that's something, like, in answer to Sabon's question, I do think as a curator or a writer or being in this zone anyway, to have the confidence to say or do anything requires connection. And I sometimes find the word community really naff, but like community. And I think the more community that you have and the more, I guess, like open that community is, the more comfortable you do feel in talking about things. So of course there's conflicts of interest. And I mean, I'm the perfect example of it. Like, I specifically curate performance. I am very much solely interested in that at the moment, and now I have a platform to talk about that and invest in that being talked about. So I think, that is all super intertwined.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if the term conflict of interest could also be replaced with community of practice.
Ooh.
Oh, if I may.
Write it down.
Just like, if there's no commercial incentive, where is the conflict? If it's the kind of, I mean, if there's a cultural capital sort of gain to be made, maybe there is no conflict. It's simply that we are all in this mess together and we're all navigating it and producing culture in multi kind of ways.
As in, like, is it about creating clout?
Cloutcreation.com.au.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all writing on our, respective platforms for a reason. We aren't just doing it out of like the kindness of our own hearts. It's a way of kind of creating profiles for ourselves to kind of help ourselves with, future job prospects, get money. So there's, even from that perspective, it's never, you're never going to be on neutral ground.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question, Sabon?
Hee.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Thanks, everyone. Anador, you made a really good point before about your piece of M-readers being more responsive than traditional critique. And I wanted to know what you think about the role of the critic changing to a more evaluative position in helping people understand art rather than make a decision as to whether it's good or not.
Yeah, and I mean, thanks, Dee. That's a really good question.
You're welcome.
I mean, fundamentally, and I kind of touched on this earlier on in this conversation, but I think fundamentally, I don't know whether or not I personally am able to evaluate whether or not something is good or bad. And I think that's a really interesting thing, especially when you're talking about the work of artists who are First Nations or people of colour, because I mean, as a white person, what's my actual place in evaluating the goodness or badness of that work? But I think I think my approach to writing about art more broadly is that of the opening it up. And so I think with performance review, I'm interested in the idea of opening up an art form that, I mean, a mode of art practice that people find genuinely incomprehensible sometimes and making it accessible. And so I think I'm really all for that. I do see the place and the value of talking about something within the mode of of critical engagement. And I think Mimo does that really well, and I think Running Dog does too. But I think I'm interested in that opening up more than anything else, because I think if you can hit somebody who has no understanding of like the formal elements of a work with like something that allows them to actually get in and somewhat understand what's going on, I think that's really important. It's like saying like, I mean, I think when you have a gallery in a space that doesn't necessarily, a community space that doesn't necessarily understand art in the way that you or I would, you still have foot traffic that comes through, and these people have access points, whether or not that's the conversation they have with the invigilator or something else. So I think writing could be that access point, and so yeah, I'm definitely all for it. What about the two of you? Do you find that role change good?
Well,
You go.
I only say bad things about big artists. Like I was looking at Hita, and I remember, I think I wrote something like that I wore black to her show because I was going to her funeral because her work stayed as soon as she makes it. Kind of like things like. But I will never be mean to like, even someone. No one close to like my level or even. They don't have to be that big, but just if they're not super established, I see no reason why I should be evaluating what they do. And I strongly believe that it's more important for people to have something to say, not so much how they say it. And for example, whenever I'm scoring proposals, I always give high marks. Sometimes, not always actually. But yeah, I don't know, I try to be like, just look past the artwork and just kind of like engage with their ideas, because I don't really see my place as, being like a gatekeeper or this kind of like Saint Michael figure protecting the gates of God, like whatever, like that's not me.
I wholeheartedly agree with that kind of rule. It's just so as a rule, it's only if you're not going to say something nice, choose an established artist who can, who will be fine. Because for a lot of young artists, our platforms are really some of the first criticism that they'll receive. And we've all had criticism about our writing or art or whatever, and it really hurts. And I don't want to put anyone in that position. And you can always find something constructive to say. It doesn't have to be glowing, but it doesn't have to be bitchy either. I think a lot of people just want to be bitchy for the sake of it.
Yeah, I would agree, and I'd also make the call that I think kind of going for more established artists is actually somewhat a really important thing, because I think there's been a long time whereby in general society, the challenging of structures as they are has not really occurred in an open forum. So I think
And you know what? The established artists are always the ones who will send you essay-length emails when you criticise their work, because, like you're saying, this level of critique hasn't been, it's not something that older generations are kind of used to, I don't think.
No, and it's also like, I mean, there's some works that exist and that, especially in this country, have been, collected into large institutions, and they're just, I mean, can you evaluate something that happened 25 years ago by modern terms? I mean, yeah. So I think like this, they require that dialogue, and sometimes someone's never heard throughout their whole life that, hey, like you're actually not challenging misogyny, you're a misogynist. Like, that's something that these people need to hear. Like, I think that's really important. Yeah, so get them.
Online criticism as tough love therapy for the older generation. Not sure, I don't know.
Ooh, why not? What do you know?
I mean, maybe it's another panel that we need to embark on. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
It's not tough love, it's just that sometimes the same criticism you would give to a younger artist and they would kind of take as constructive criticism, if you applied that to a more established artist who has had their ego stroked and have always been coddled, they're the ones who are most hurt by it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's because they need to be able to be given a critical framework that exists outside of what they have always been told is the vein that they're working in. Like, I think something that's interesting about everything that played out with Black Lives Matter last year online was that it did force people who have never had to look at whether or not their work is applicable to the practice of decolonization through that lens. And I think that, for example, is really important, to be able to say like that someone can look at their practice or like their oeuvre of the last 30 years and go, I could have done X, Y, and Z better if I had a different framework. I think that is really an important place to be, I guess. Yeah.
Also, being able to write about institutions, I've always thought that it was fine to I thought that one of Australian values was freedom of expression, but but then, I mean, I'm not gonna say the writer or the institution, but they wrote this very critical piece, and then just hearing about everything that happened afterwards and sort of stopping them from speaking or just kind of seeking legal action. So it's not a healthy environment where, you have this art world that doesn't allow writers to critique it. It's not. That's not a democracy.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have another question? Yeah, I think shall we wind it up? I think. Yeah. Right on. So please thank Diego Ramirez, Anadol Walsh, Emilia Winata.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll be back at 1:30 with a panel on dance and digitization of dance. See you then.
Music is the medicine. These beats got us out of control. Dance around like you never get old. Breaking and popping on my boys pop locking. Got us feeling like we out of this world. Get your mask, get the angon balle. Eka going alligo. Go more una, to more una. Mupan me use the monthly beat. Ko jamar ko limitly price ko. Go hard, never lay back, lay back. To real time, fake that, fake that. Smile for the gram like take that, take that. Shout out to the OGs like way back, way back. You got stage fright? No problem. You got neck brace? No problem. You got two left feet, can't catch that beat. Take a deep breath, cause I got this, yo. I got the medicine. Music is the medicine. understand, but they don't understand. I'm just a brother rapping on them land. Go hard, never lay back, lay back. Too real, can't fake that, fake that. Smile for the gram, like take that, take that. Shout out to the OGs like way back, way back. You got stage fright? No problem. You got neck brace? No problem. You got two left feet, can't catch that beat. Take a deep breath, cause I got this, yo. I got the mitigen. Music is the mitigen. I got the mitigen. Music is the mitigen.
Yeah, yeah, baby, free your mind. If you're driven for the vision, then I'm down to ride. Where the beat drop, there me you'll find. And we still in the city, but the crowd going wild. Ooh, yeah, keep it banging through the system. Light it up, start it up like an engine. Bars on lock, but the music freedom. And the booty drum go put up a bump bump. Hey, okay, yeah, come. I give you some of this, make it jump. Do it just to do it, and I do it till it's done. Connect with the sound, people over income. That's team, that's squad, get the picture. That's us, that's mob. If you with us, just be, yeah, the queen is in the building. You better come correct if you're knocking at the kingdom. Yeah, okay, is it with us? Yeah, okay, is it with us? Just be, yeah, the queen is in the building. You better come correct if you're knocking at the kingdom.
I got the mitigen. Music is the mitigen. I got the mitigen. Music is the mitigen. I got the mitigen. Music is the mitigen. I got the mitigen. Music is the mitigen.
Last time, could've saved my life, putting me in like a tie-dye. Feel the energy rise, girl. Too late to be giving me your two faces. See you riding a new way, but you're floating in my world. Ooh, you can't deny that you wanna stay. Oh, ooh, I can't see this working any other way. If you want, just say you wanna. 'Cause
One touch, I'm a victim. One look in your eyes, I'm in. One kiss, I'm addicted. One drink and a sink or swim. I'm feeling vulnerable. What if I let go? You make me want to though. The thing about love, it ain't simple enough. The thing about trust is it takes two of us. So if I let you in here tonight, 100 degrees, no you want to, but please don't touch me if you don't mean it. The space between our skin saying more than enough, but once you lay your finger it can't be undone. So please don't touch me if you don't mean it. Don't know how it's been, yeah, I've been through enough, but once you put your hands here it can't be undone. So please don't touch me if you don't mean it. Touch me if you don't mean it. 2 nights in a row now, I brought you back to mine. 3 was getting closer, saying how far I lose my mind. I'm feeling vulnerable. What if I let go? You make me want to though. Oh, the thing about love, it ain't simple enough. The thing about trust is it takes two of us. So if I let you in here tonight, 100 degrees, no you want to, but please don't touch me if you don't mean it. The space between our skin saying more than enough, but once you lay your finger it can't be undone. So please don't touch me if you don't mean it. Don't know how it's been, yeah, I've been through enough, but once you put your hands here it can't be undone. So please don't touch me if you don't mean it. Touch me if you don't mean it. Breaking me down, lowest of lows I've been for a while. Don't want to be calling you 3 a.m. Begging you, baby, to love me again. So please don't touch me if you don't mean it. The space between our skin saying more than enough, but once you lay your finger it can't be undone. So please don't touch me if you don't mean it. Don't know how it's been, yeah, I've been through enough, but once you put your hands here it can't be undone. So please don't touch me if you don't mean it. Touch me if you don't mean it. Touch me if force, tu la veux contre la tienne, et jamais avec toi. Tu crois gagner dans les pleurs de l'autre, la marque du roi. Mais tu brilles déjà fort sur ma peau. C'est tort, c'est toi, c'est tort, c'est toi. Pourrais-tu m'aimer? Ça j'en doute, ça j'en doute. Quand tu prends ce que tu veux de moi, quand tu prends, quand tu n'aimes ce que tu veux de moi, quand tu n'aimes, quand tu ne veux qu'une partie de moi. Pourrais-tu m'aimer? Ça j'en doute, ça j'en doute. Quand tu prends ce que tu veux de moi, quand tu prends, quand tu n'aimes ce que tu veux de moi, quand tu m'aimes et que je disparais dans tes bras. Aïe 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 dans les pleurs de l'autre, dans la fontaine de l'autre, dans la rivière de l'autre. Pourrais-tu m'aimer dans les pleurs de l'autre? Pourrais-tu m'aimer dans la rivière de l'autre? Pourrais-tu m'aimer dans la mer de l'autre? What you say? Are you ready for the night to be the day? Got temptation written all over your face. Don't you tell me that you only love the chase. Let's find a way. Meet me at the bar and don't be late. I could drink you up like summer lemonade. Give it to me, baby, straight, no chase. Once we get this thing in motion, we won't have no time to talk. Moving in the dark, we ain't never gonna stop. Oh, oh. We don't need a reason, we just keep the feeling. Everybody's sleeping, we go overtime. Moving to the future, let me
telling you the same thing.
All right, so welcome to the Great Hall. Welcome to Print Screen. This is the final panel of the weekend program at the Art Book Fair, the reduced COVID-safe Art Book Fair, which looks a bit different from last year, but exists. And we exist. We are here to talk about dance and the kind of performance, the kind of digitization of dance, what happened in 2020. This whole project, Print Screen, is all about the kind of mutation of publications, of new forms of distribution. And I'm very happy to talk about network bodies and static bodies with Lillian Steiner, Harrison Hall, Sam McGilp, and Xian Law. Please give them a round of applause. All right. So we're going to have a kind of pretty open discussion. We have some videos of each of these artists' work to show. So I'm kind of fascinated by this time of COVID, which we've passed through, the 2020 year, where everybody's body was constricted and restrained in some way by these kind of biosecurity rules. And I think dancers felt this very intensely. Maybe if I could invite you to maybe just talk about the last year and maybe just generally introduce your practice and maybe how it's changed through that time.
Hey everyone. I think last year was a time of stagnation for my body. There was no goal in sight of why I should dance or move. It felt like there was no, it was not essential to my survival. So I really felt a shutdown of my body. And then that led, I think, to thinking about how, what movement meant in that state. I know a lot of dancers around me in the community. A lot of us found it really hard to dance. We seemingly resorted to things like Feldenkrais, which is like a somatic movement practice. And I think it was a real slowdown of my engagement with my physical self.
Xian, Lillian?
Oh, yeah, that's the mic. I have a very productive year. So I think it's kind of good when it's kind of quiet, like almost dead silence, and then there's a lot of clarity about what I want to do, how I'm going to do it, where I'm going to do it. Since there's no option, so the path is quite clear. Yeah. Digital, you know. I think this is quite an Australian thing where everyone followed the rules and regulation very tightly, whereas I'm a bit liberal. I sort of engage with it critically, like, you know, I do go out at the times that I shouldn't to do work. I'm not meant to do it, but I still deal a bit in some way that doesn't really jeopardize anyone, just me alone. And that is quite liberating. Like, that's like my last fortress of my humanity that I can insist upon. I think that was like a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so freedom within restriction somehow.
Yeah. I had to find kind of like crevices and cracks where the loopholes are, and then to try to do work within that sphere still, because art has to keep going. You know, that's my point of view, but.
Yeah, for me, it was kind of funny. I went through like many phases of being with and inside my body and then outside and without my body. I think before the pandemic kind of hit, I was really active, like traveling a lot and very in a dance body. So I remember having this feeling of, which I think, we all did, of like stress about not being able to do that. And I found myself, dancing in the park and then also really hating that I was doing that. And I guess there was something about not having space to move or be with other bodies that revealed, yeah, this spectrum of like being with my body, being with other bodies, being inside a body, having a body, but not being with it. Yeah, that kind of flux was probably the biggest experience, which, as Harrison was saying, you know, starting to like get attracted to softer or more gentler internalized practices was a way of heightening the sense of being with the body. But then at times I found myself trying to do that and realizing that I really didn't care, and actually I just wanted to go for a walk and be distracted from having a body. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not dancing with people is a bit hard. Not dancing together is quite difficult to get through.
Yeah.
Being alone, dancing alone, you don't know there's a recipient of your dance, and that is difficult.
Yeah.
And not having an audience, like you know, even if we go to class in the morning to to kind of train ourselves, we're watching each other and learning that way, but there's a purpose to execute something with your body, because it's in a shared space where when the only option to be kind of observed in a state of dance is to have a camera on your phone set up in a corner of your lounge room, like that feels really aggressive or something.
Yeah, what was that like, that kind of well-publicized pivot to digital, which everyone talked about last year? I mean, was it just an expansion of already a trajectory you were on and kind of enhanced that? Or was it, as you say, quite aggressive? Lillian felt quite intrusive at times. I kind of wonder, is it like this prosthetic limb that you add on the media or the kind of camera presence in that 2020 shutdown time? Or is it more, was it kind of more natural than that?
I think, I'm a media artist, I'm not a dancer, and so my practice is more inherently digital, and my background is in film, but more recently working in kind of contemporary performance contexts. And so I felt an energy towards my practice, a momentum, and also gave time for me and Harrison to work together in ways that we'd been sort of imagining but not had the time or energy to put into, that were kind of inherently solo ways or disconnected. So example, motion capture was something that we'd been wanting to work more towards but hadn't had just the time to put into it yet. And of course, motion capture is something, I suppose, that one person does solo by themselves, and it's a different relationship than you would have with a camera, like sitting in the corner of the room. But certainly, it's still a limiting form, or it's its own form that compels things of the performer.
Yeah, I guess that 3D world is also very intentional. Everything produced in it has to exist with your own intention. There's not much of that sort of incidental, like picked up camera material.
Well, I suppose maybe it's just because we were learning the process of doing it and not aiming for something that was extremely precise and accurate at all times, but there were often glitches thrown up from the digital material that we felt were these kind of impromptu offers coming from that space, or that those kind of more chance encounters that you might experience in live performance development as well.
Yeah, I think maybe it's a good time to show the Activators Bonanza video following on from what you've just talked about. Would you like to just do a brief introduction, Harrison?
Yeah. Is it going FFF first into Bonanza?
FFF first, Bonanza.
Yep, great. So FFF was first, it was supported by Chunky Move, and it was basically a bit of money to buy technology to use, and that was an initial practice of putting the body through motion capture into the digital space with animation. And then from that, I was then re-curated by Chunky Move to create something with Sam, and that was Bonanza, which was also in collaboration with Alpha 60. So it's kind of questioning the digital digestion of the body. that was clearly out of the first hard lockdown.
We like the idea that technology is also, it's just a new god.
What interests you about the relationship between the physical and the digital?
I think that the application, expansion, and development of new technologies creates an illusory world. But what we think of as illusory now is likely to be reality in the future. But technology is just a tool. The quality of the world is not particularly related to the development of technology, but always related to people's minds, because it is people who are using these technical tools.
Sorry about that. That was quite a lot. So yeah, I guess I don't know. I don't know if you could see from that, but for me there was quite a clear ideation of going through a more real life filmic kind of mode into a more digitized. And there was a lot of influences in there. We invited some artists from Taiwan and from Shanghai to collaborate with us, and they're much more expert in the field of digitization than us. So it was really good to kind of place them as the philosophers of the piece that could kind of, yeah, give a lot of the bedrock for the information.
That was produced in the second lockdown,
Yeah.
mostly, with some human contact between you and some remote contact.
Yeah, so we worked, initially we were quite separate and it kept getting cancelled, obviously. So everything kept feeding in and I think it started off a lot darker, but then the lockdowns kept getting more and more extended. It was a bit groany, you know? And so I think by the end we ended up in a more celebratory kind of, place. Yeah, just in response to what the zeitgeist was doing, I think.
Yeah, and I think we were really energized by what we were making as well. It had been a period of time of lockdown, isolation, not a lot of input, and part of that thing of wanting to center discourse in the work was that reaching out to a community, trying to connect with the international community of practice that we hadn't had the chance to do anything with for the year. So it was energizing, the process of making it, even if going back, I suppose, to what I was saying before about how motion capture entails a certain kind of performance, it meant, it must have been really tough for you, because it's an extremely high dynamism for short periods of time, kind of like you're shooting, but it's like, okay, you have to do this extreme body movement, 3 seconds, go, do it again, you know what I mean? That sort of, and from someone who hadn't been dancing for a while, that sounds pretty full on, to be honest.
Yeah, it was, particularly some of that rhythmic gymnastics section towards the end. I'm pretty sure I injured myself. But, a lot of that was shot in my backyard, Like, it was just a constant practice of sitting on the computer, then going out, shooting something, sitting on the computer and doing that. So very different to the type of kind of dance and social choreographic spaces that we're kind of used to working in. So, yeah.
I think Lillian also, I think you had a very personal relationship to the camera. I think during the lockdown and producing these short works, which were kind of intimate moments and kind of renegotiations with the camera. Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny. Well, not funny, but I was living alone during the second lockdown, and there was something, again, just this aggression of the camera. I was like, just the screens in general, at some point I really was like, oh, this is, there's like a yuckiness to interacting with screen, and the act of me as a solo person setting up a camera to film myself felt really narcissistic, but it was the only way I could engage or share my practice outwardly, which was kind of a complicated thing. But yeah, I got kind of interested in the subtleties of what my body was maybe doing as a dancing body, but also just as a human, and that kind of, the ability for human action to be dance to action without me having to, I guess, announce the fact of the body dancing.
Yeah, and you were working with the clay in development.
Oh, yeah. I guess like a lot of people, I started looking to other mediums because it felt weird to get up and dance in my lounge room as a main source of creativity or in the park. So, I wanted something tactile and something about clay being sort of fleshy. Was an attempt to reach out to kind of, put this body into something else. And these, they're a little bit lame, but I was writing a duet, a contact duet with my friend Rebecca Jensen. From our separate bedrooms, we, basically we're in a shared Google Doc and simultaneously writing, this contact duet. We were speaking every day, and while I was speaking to her, I just started playing with the clay, and then, got on to making these kind of clay duets, which are super lame, but they sort of sparked an interest in clay, which led me to buy 150 kilograms of clay to kind of create a substitute dance partner or another body to co-inhabit my living space. It's a bit creepy. It's just under my bed now, like a kind of dead human
Yeah.
substitute.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are those mythological links to that, like, what's that?
Golem.
The golem, the kind of the Yiddish mythology.
Yeah.
Of creating life through this inanimate clay form.
Yeah, and
I think we tried to do something similar as well at times with using motion capture and then augmented reality to be able to transfer the data from one person to another, and so you could move in relation to a body in space. But I think we generally found there wasn't any sense of co-presence. It's sort of the opposite kind of thing. You don't have anything to hold on to. You have something to move in relation to and something to respond to in the live, but not, I don't know, connection, response, actual
But what was
exchange.
maybe interesting and devastating for me was that I kind of, very creepily set up the camera and like this tarp in my lounge room. I had to shut the blinds because opposite, like our neighbours, and they could see in. And I was like, okay, this is a bit weird. So close the blinds, put the camera on, start rolling around with this huge, heavy mass of clay, and realising that it was really cold and it was really heavy, and it didn't. My intention was that my dancing would, or like my movement would, impress or make impressions in the clay, and it would help me make choices about how I moved. But it didn't want to move, and it was just cold and hard and heavy, and it didn't want to give in to my desires. And so then I was left with this really heavy thing that was kind of messy and being filmed. And I kept attempting to make it yield to my desire, but it was like, no, you will not dance now.
Yeah, it's a very poetic image, sort of this lone person in a Brunswick West flat, kind of
tragic.
negotiating space with this clay. Like it's a whole short film in itself, I think. Very beautiful. I mean, I have to admit a conflict of interest here, as I was also in a project with Lillian during lockdown, which was a video which I think we can show a piece of, becoming the icon. Yeah, which part should we show?
I guess the maybe interesting thing about this project was that we started it in 2018.
Yeah.
And it was meant to have a live presentation in 2020. And because that couldn't happen, we then had to kind of take it to the digital space through, editing footage into a film. But we also weren't able to film anything new because we were in the deep lockdown. So we had to create a work out of footage we already had.
Yeah.
Which was just an interesting thing, I guess, in terms of filming dance in any context and having to edit it, and the editing process becoming the choreographing process, because that becomes the material. You don't have bodies and space and time anymore. You have images.
Yeah, I think it was, it went through this sausage machine process of being turned into multiple different kind of forms, and eventually came out as a short film. But I think we'll just play an excerpt of it and maybe talk over it where we need to.
Floating.
How do you make it come here quicker?
If you look inside, you'll start to see it arriving a little bit quicker.
How do we talk to it?
You have to speak with the truth.
Yep, that's us.
Emile can't stop, it's just coming out. But it's interesting also, I guess, when you spend a lot of time watching yourself moving, but not moving in your actual present body. yeah, it still goes in and becomes, like the material becomes quite solid in the body.
Move through. Yeah, really looking at different kinds of gesture and modes of these kind of prosthetic gestural devices. I haven't watched it for a long time. Yeah.
Doodling.
And I guess one thing that was kind of interesting about this project too was, yeah, having to get used to the idea that a work that we always thought would be live was, then going to be for a screen and not for a cinematic screen, but probably people's laptops. And the question of how much to make that screen laptop world a theatre and treat it like a theatre, or whether to make something cinematic. And how to frame that, I guess.
Yeah.
And whether you have any choice in that at the end of the day, or whether people just see it as a work for screen that they can press pause at any moment and go and make a cup of tea, or just quit it. Whereas in a theatre, you're kind of obliged to sit and watch and stay with the journey of something. Duration plays into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the event-based nature of the way we showed this was also important, that it was publicized to show online in a streaming mode at one time, at 7 p.m. on one day. So in the middle of lockdown, it was important that it was this event that was publicized and only happened once. So really trying to give a sense of, you have to be here at this time to experience this cultural moment and experience it live. So yeah, I'm glad we made it quite restrictive in the initial presentation, but then made it open for watching later on. Yeah. And Xian, I'd like to also talk about your work in the underpass, these
Wow.
kind of private moments that you recorded.
Yeah.
You talked a bit about the kind of defying.
I have to apologize. I work at the lower end of technologies. It's just a phone turned on. I don't even have a tripod. Usually just rest on the bicycle. Try to, get a level. That's about it. It's really low tech.
So
yeah.
To introduce this performance we're going to see. Yeah.
This is a gag reel. It's not. I wouldn't call it art per se, because it's not something that I'll labor away in the studio. It's more like a testimonial of art, I think. Have a look. Like, it's funny. I did it to make my friends laugh.
Yeah. It's a good reason.
Yeah.
Audio? tell us a bit more about that amazing video of how it was produced and the story behind it?
No, I don't know the guy. But I know the dog's name is Bo, like Obama's dog. I never met him. I have not seen him again at that place. So he's not a plant. Like he just. We haven't got the permission to show it actually, but he didn't get my permission to be in my videos.
Yeah.
So I think it's fair.
Yeah.
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 It's all very ethical.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's not a thing that I'll make in the studio. Like come up with a project. Like a random stranger will just walk into it and then it'll be something. It's not something that I would do, but it is quite a testimonial to art. Like if you have a few beverage, you can really dance.
Yeah.
And then you've let your gut down, you do it. If the moment is right, you happen to be with the right person, you become art. So anybody can do it.
Yeah.
You probably need a friend, but
Yeah, and I was interested in what you said before about.
And get shown an NGV. I have not received any funding for this. Just iPhone.
The People's Institution, the high-vis contemporary dance.
Yeah, like it's quite ironic in that sense. Like it was almost a hobbyist sort of pursuit.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Like there's no institution, there's nothing to hold us up as dancer. So we just perform. I just went to the street. I took it to the streets.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said before that you were producing it for your friends, for a laugh, in a casual kind of way, and I guess that's what was missing from that period of lockdown when you were kind of not sort of around your friends and around people in that very direct, intense way.
Videos is like they're very good for documentation. Basically, it's like if a tree fell in the forest, like does it make a sound? Like with a video, like you really did something. So it's quite tangible. It's dated. Like you have a bad logo. So there's a narrative, and that narrative is quite important for artists. As much as the context is as important as the actual work. So.
Yeah, and that video was part of a series where you were performing under the underpass?
Yeah, I go there almost every day, even though I wasn't supposed to, but I'll spend like 3 hours during lockdown. There's no one, it's a drain, so like no one is going to check on me. So I did a lot of work there, and I was just waiting for something to happen. Yeah, and then, I see threads, and then some become a collection. I'm making the right offspring. I'm very audacious in that way. And then this is a gag reel. Like, I was so annoyed at him because he took the center stage as well.
Yeah.
Like, none of the dancers that I danced with did that.
The dog is a great addition as well.
Yeah, like he was like the center the whole time. I was really annoyed at him. I wasn't like coming up in the moment. I wasn't coming up with a project. Okay, I'll do this.
Yeah.
I was just literally very angry at him. Yeah, it's like my precious moment with myself, and he ruined it. So, yeah. But I think it's. I don't know. It's quite a testimonial to art, like the power of art. If people let their guard down, they can really dance, really. And there's something, he's quite humane.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Like, he's quite vulnerable. You empathize with him. He was very drunk. He didn't know that I was a man or a woman or He was just like, would you like to stay with me? And I was like, oh, no thanks. And then he asked me, are you being truthful with yourself? He was quite smart. He asked me, was I being truthful with myself if I didn't want to go out with him?
Yeah.
And then I said, yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. It's quite a social, it's socially engaged art, participatory theater, everything you name it is in it.
Yeah, I quite like the taking the boots off to get more sort of...
Oh, he took his pants off, actually.
Pants off?
Yeah. It's NGV, we can't show that.
Yeah.
He took his pants off.
Yeah. So, I wonder. Yeah, it's hard to move around that amazing video, but kind of in regards to the kind of going forward for dancers, for performers, what has this past year, taught us? What is to be left? What is something you don't want to go through again in that horrible COVID lockdown scenario? Or what is to be retained? What is kind of energetic and vital from that period?
I think the problem is that art is so institutionalized, you almost cannot look at it from other angle, and that is bad. And whereas doing silly things like that, it just reminds me there's, it has to exist in people's lives. And it can't just be an institution and, represented in that way. And dance is a very immediate form. It's transmission from body to body. So the life components of dance will never go away. It will always be there till, the end of human race, maybe. I think it survived so many world wars, 2 world wars, some various wars, pandemics or not. Yeah, so you'll always be there. I suppose, the institution structure really doesn't, it somehow puts a barrier between art and people, I think, sometimes.
I think one thing that's really shifted is just my idea of my body. I think it used to have been, a vessel with which I engage with the world or something really lame and trad like that. But now I think it's where I can put my mind or my consciousness. And I think watching some of these videos and just seeing, I'm really interested in where choreography can go from the learning of the digital. I mean, if you look at TikTok now, you can see there's a lot of dance going on that's really influenced by video. A lot of stop motion kind of influence in the movement, or fast scrubbing. A lot of these things are coming out. And what I'm really interested in is how this kind of digital affectation of the body starts to affect my physical neurology. So as I'm watching these digital affectations, these glitches, how will I start dancing? And that's something that's, that's a future question that I think we'll, go forward with.
Harrison, that's not new though, because back then when people in VHS started, choreographers do use that.
Oh, totally.
Digital is a speed up version of that.
Yeah. Sorry, what I'm saying is that, so that was with video, and that's why, we have all these TikToks coming out now. I think in terms of with the digital, kind of like with motion capture, digital work, there's some things that happen, impossible things of the body that are, that maybe people have already started. But I think for me personally, it's just, how that affects what my real physical performance becomes.
Yeah, I guess working out how to extend this tool, because as dancers, it's a blessing and a curse that you always have to work with your own body. I mean, of course, you can choreograph for other bodies, but there's quite a lot of the structural limitation in what this material is, and I guess I guess on the other side, I found myself moving away from technology more and more and looking at other materials. But again, just as a way of extending the experience of the body. And I guess just more and more realizing that I was at a birthday the other evening, and there was a singer, and she was really good at being an outward performer. And I was like, wow, I don't know how to do that. But I know how to perform, and I have performed for my whole life. But there's something about dance, I think, that most dancers are quite good at actually just working on an internal process and sharing that rather than performing outwards. And so I think for me, there's that tension between being performative and I don't really know what the right word is, but transmitting something about the internal, which has always been something that we try and really work on, the ability to function internally in a very rigorous way and allow that to be seen or felt in another body. But yeah, for me, it's like, how can I do that more? How can I work more internally in order to share what the work is?
Like images are not the true reflection of ourselves. It will never be. It's like a different beast. The more reliable source of information about ourselves is through people, through relationships. They're more reliable than just pure image, I think. I'm a bit old-fashioned, I think. Yeah, this is, even, the impossibilities, they're just a different, sometimes I wonder, why did I dance so fast? And I look at the film rates. Oh, right, I didn't dance that fast. It's just that, it's encoded in a faster rate that I normally dance. So if I assume that is my speed, it's a wrong assumption. So we're not that good. With TikTok and all that software comes out with all kind of presets that allow you to do, but we are not that. But I think the only possibilities of doing that is like when biohacks kind of technology become available, that we can actually learn using like that kind of technologies. For instance, we can teach, let's say dance, we can communicate the information, your heart rate, your body temperature, your actual real speed. Like if all that become measurable, available to like normal people like us, and then to share it, then we can talk about like choreographic in a sort of on steroid sort of level.
I kind of think that like datafication is happening in elite sport when you have
definitely
measurements of football teams running around the pitch, and it's kind of a very dense data bodies that exist, as well as the human bodies and the flesh bodies, and I'm very interested in this empathetic reaction in all of your works. You've got very interesting and diverse kind of empathies at play with this tradie who is kind of innocently or not innocently dancing with you, and then these kind of future bodies, which are projections from the future, which we can kind of recognize as our future data bodies, and then a very personal, kind of empathetic performance, like personal performance. So
I guess the question, like starting to work with technology, or the potential to, is like, even speaking about data collection and that being something that creates the experience of the form. Like, how and when do we want to utilize that and move and really push into it in the best or the biggest way possible, and like knowing when not to do that, and how to separate the kind of like forward trajectory towards technology just in a general sense, and when to resist it, and how to counter it in maybe a very subtle and intimate, personal way, like with this one tradie and the dog, like how to kind of go, this is a proposition that dance can offer that technology cannot. And then, when you let it in and as a way of questioning and furthering the form, I think it's important to know what choices you're making.
Look, I think we are already thinking in technological terms already. We don't notice it, but we do. Like, we construct ourselves based on social media. So it has already happened, it's already underway. It's a matter of like, in practice, how can we actually do it? Like, I don't know. Do you have any?
Well, I think the forms of work that we've been talking about, screen-based work predominantly, are just inherently different from performance in the fact that they're static once they're edited and completed their set and they don't have a response. There's not separate to the liveness of performativity, there's not a liveness of interaction between audience and artist. But I don't think that's necessary of digital form in and of itself. And I think it goes a little bit to what you're saying about some sort of brain link to be able to transmit data and things, but I think that we don't need to be that far. There's just responsive works where you can have a genuine exchange between audience and artist, and of course,
I think porn industry has really advanced technologies, I suppose, like in terms of tactile, and I can't believe nobody incorporates that in their use that in
haptic feedback into
using because it has to feel great, right? For it to sell. So I don't see why not. That can be apply to other sort of, yeah.
Yeah. Like, what kind of technologies within that kind of porn world are you?
Like, I think there's a lot of VR technology, and then it's like, with hardware, for instance, like headset and things like that.
Yeah.
Masturbator, I don't know.
Yeah.
So if that can be used to produce, experience for sex, purpose of sex, pleasure, then it can be used for the purpose of art.
But is art linked to pleasure? Should it be linked to pleasure? Like, I mean, I think it should be, but
art is pleasurable.
Yeah, but I think in a lot of the kind of larger discourse, I think that is not accepted, and beauty isn't accepted either. Maybe not in the dance world, but in other realms of art.
I think it has more to do with truth that is important with art. It has to have the element of truth or something. It doesn't have to be beauty. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
But I guess it's interesting if you're talking about VR as well, and the screen being this. Even though you kind of you are able to create a 3D or more than 3D space by like pulling the body apart. Like I think that is, for me, why that work is so successful as a choreographic work for screen is that there's dimension in the space because the body is, it's being ripped apart or it's transcending the flat image. But then I guess in terms of like the porn industry or like, learning that ASMR, like other, like the details of how you stimulate this feeling of like a new body-to-body experience because we're never going to get this real life one. So we just should acknowledge that it's not possible and work out how to do, like, what is the valuable way, whatever value means, but like what is a valuable way to like recontextualize what the body is when it's being received via technology and not trying to make it something that we can just do and have in this real life scenario.
I think I'm more ready to accept digital as a human experience. I think that if COVID-19 is something, we kind of like embrace that. That's just part of human experience. And that's not to say that will replace the real. I don't think so.
Yeah, I think both are developing in directions. As much as right now, technologically, we're at a certain stage, there has been a huge steroid injection into these developments of haptic suits. And some of this, I guess, porn technology, but VR definitely. I mean, Facebook just bought one of the, it's not great, but it just bought one of the largest VR companies, and they're selling them really cheap. So it's really about getting a mass adoption now. So as much as, I love dance. I love the social nature of dance. During lockdown, I was really aware of how I could connect to people in a kind of quasi-embodied space around the world, or even, from 5 kilometers away through these spaces. And sure, it wasn't the same serotonin, dopamine reaction, but it was still something.
I think it's time to open it up to the audience for questions. If there are any questions, we have a roving mic floating around. Do we have any questions? I think we've ascended quite nicely into some larger realm. It's ascended nicely. Any questions from the audience? If not, I think we might wrap it up. Any more comments? We have one over there.
Have you worked with deaf people? Have you worked in your performances using deaf people to dance with?
Dead people.
Deaf.
Oh.
I haven't specifically worked in a creative project with a deaf person, but there's, there's one like close friend who is a deaf dancer, and she's incredible. Her name is Anna Seymour, and I think we probably all have had some experience dancing with her, and it's quite amazing just being in a studio with her and working in a class context and experiencing what it means to have a slightly shifted perspective of what the body is and the way that it communicates, I guess, and the way it listens, because she is hypersensitive and aware, and I guess that's one thing that dance does really well, like this non-verbal communication. You really learn how to tune into that empathetic layer between humans. And I guess like anybody knows, gestural movement can communicate so much. So I guess, she has an even heightened sense of that. Why do you ask?
Yeah. I used to go to Arts Access, which had a whole area donated to deaf people dance. And it started up deaf dance and all that sort of thing.
I think dance is a really, Anna once said to me something along the lines of that dance is like, it's not, we should just kind of think about it's not separate to how she experiences the world, because it is always through her body, so it's like again, a heightened sensitivity to that. I feel like everybody should actually have an experience with dance in their lifetimes, because it is about tuning into that really sensitive layer where we all have a body and we all are always in relation to space and time and other people and ourselves and the layers of ourselves. And dance can kind of move very seamlessly through those layers. Can't advocate enough, but there's something to say.
I think what it highlighted to me in the discussions today is Harrison, you were talking to this kind of social aspect of dance, but I think what's been highlighted even more just through discussions that we've had today, even though we're talking about a kind of modality of dance on screen, there's a kind of relationality about dance that I think has been pulled even from each discussion and each project as it exists on screen. Even hearing Lillian talk about in person, in the real with us here right now, your project, and that the body kind of twists, to be seated in a room with people where we discuss this kind of relational aspect, how do we relate to the film on screen, actually changes my experience inherently from how I viewed your work in the first instance. So I think it's about this thinking, and I want to kind of go to Xian here. Hello, Xian. With your work, I've never seen you engage with the body in that way. And then here to discuss it in a kind of very relational way. What...
I've always worked with non-dancers.
Yeah, non-dancers, and I've seen those works before, but I guess not to this effect. So the question that I kind of want to pose to you is, what's next after engaging with a body like this in a kind of gag reel? Has this changed, or will this shift anything about your kind of your approach to working with bodies, which is often quite, you do lots of thinking, you go very deep, whereas this is a kind of lives on a much more,
manifestation.
Yeah.
Like from, gestation to manifestation, the shortest pathway. Like, I think that's what I got from COVID-19. We're all going to die, so do it now. Like, that was a mentality. But there's something, because it sort of instigates our intuition. Like, we have to believe our intuition a bit more. I think art has become quite theorized, organized, or it becomes, and then I just realized that, okay, like this is institution, like it only exists in, institute with power. What about like family, other kind of institution like family, like community? Because dance used to have the kind of, it's performed in those institutions more than And then now it's more like, this kind of institution. So I don't know how to fight that, but, like what I can do is like get it out there, let go, and move quicker than the institution, I think. That's like my strategy. Sorry, it's not a very good one.
Great. Any other comments from?
Because the institution would never ever meet a drunk person.
Yeah.
Really. If this is like an institutionalized project, it would never, that chance will never happen. It comes from a very specific condition of life, I think, for artists to engage with. But it's chance, it's serendipity, and yeah.
But it's also interesting, like, that the institutionalization of performance in general, like, it makes performance artists, really theorize and plan out to a T so many details about the framing and therefore how it's received and then therefore how it's thought about as an art form into the future. And it makes the body a bit stuck somehow. Even if it's an improvised performance, there's so many parameters that kind of put this tone in the body where you kind of stand up away from the ground and you have to like actively remember to like settle back into the floor, with your weight, because there's a buzzing that's going on that's about the framing of this trying to make something more than it is, but in trying to do that, it's detracting from the magic or the actual excitable energy inside of the thing. And like, so watching that, it's like that guy was really engaging with your dance, and he was physically taking it on, and maybe he thought about it later, maybe he didn't, doesn't really matter, but his body participated, and therefore, I don't know, it's kind of more, it's a bigger participation than sitting and watching something in a theatre.
I think it's more his dance. It's not my dance. We just happen to be in the same space. I feel like he came from a really authentic space that he wants to be with me, but he can only do it in the way that he knew how. And I think that's something valuable in that everybody has dances, that it's not institutionalized, it belongs to you. Like when you're happy, when you're, you do a little dance, and that dance belongs to you and alone. And somehow that never gets validated. That gets, shamed a lot of times. So I think that's that's a problem of our society. Like, we're so ashamed of things like that. Like, I don't know. I think if everybody turns off the light in their living room, turn the music really loud, you're the best dancer in the world. I'm sure. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if nobody can see, like, without judgment. I think it's a judgment, but where does the judgment come from? Institution. Who gives the money, and then who validates that? Who gives that prestige? And is that true? I think that's like, it's not, I don't think it's true. It can't be always true. Like, I think so, where's the guideline? I think we need to recalibrate that a bit more in this time, like revolution.
All right, I think that's a very good place to end. Please thank the panel, Xian Luo, Sam McGill, Harrison Hall, Lillian Steiner. My name is Emile Zile. Please subscribe to Print Screen podcasts in the future. Thanks for coming, and all the best. Bye-bye. Right on.